You're listening to Opacity, a podcast about working in design. Good morning, Tom. How are you doing today?
Morning, Craig. I'm pretty good. How's yourself?
I'm good. Enjoying this winter chill. Is it winter chill?
Yeah, it's kind of winter.
Chilly.
Yeah. So I think maybe we just get straight into the topic. Do you think today?
Let's get straight into it. Yeah. No fluff.
No fluff. Well, we talked about the weather, which is about as fluffy as you can get, but hey. So what we're planning to talk about today is junior/entry level designers. How do we want to word this? I know that it's kind of a...
Yeah, it's like we just kind of want to meander on this topic of kind of new designers, I guess. Yeah. Being new to the industry as opposed to kind of being new to a job. But just the kind of that space that new designers, whether they're fresh out of school or trying to transition or whatever, that kind of moment in time where moving into the first job and then being in that first job. It's just sort of, meander on that topic.
Sounds good.
See where we get to.
Yeah, and I did mention the word junior at the start there, but I don't know how you feel about it. I know a lot of people don't feel so good about it as a term. I know it's been in the industry for a long time and stuff, but it kind of feels a little bit demeaning maybe. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Especially if someone's transitioning later in their career into a role and they're sort of new to the industry, but they definitely don't consider themselves to be a junior.
Yeah, I'm not a fan, but I'm curious, what was your first title?
My first title was, it didn't have junior, but I did, so after college I did 2 internships. I wasn't too, to be honest with you, I wasn't too bothered at the time of the title. It didn't bother me at all really. But one thing I did do is I didn't use the term junior at all, or like new experience or any of that type of stuff when I was sending out emails to people. I actually, the other day, I look back on the good thing about having an email address that you still use after many years is that you can look back and cringe maybe a little bit at some of the messages that you send around. But the term I used was, I think it was digital designer looking for creative opportunities. Right, and that's and I looked at a couple of the emails that I sent out, and the response was great. Like they obviously looked at my portfolio at the time as well, so they liked what they saw as well. So that's
that wooed them.
Yeah, it wooed them a little bit, right? So, but it was interesting having a conversation with people at the time, because I remember one person in particular was like, so what kind of opportunities are you looking for? Because like, where do you see, like, it was an interesting thing, because it's like, are you looking for an internship? Are you looking for a job? What is it? And I left it kind of open-ended. I would ideally like a job, but I wanted to get into the industry, and I wanted to work with places and get experience in places that did good work. And they were the only places that I was really kind of reaching out to. So to my mind, if they had a job, that would be brilliant. If it was just an internship that they had, then I would definitely take that for a portion of time. But I definitely didn't. I didn't kind of communicate to others that I was a junior.
I wonder if just a thought here of whether that's, because obviously the industry, has matured a bit over the years. I wonder if the way we started out sort of showed that the industry wasn't quite mature enough, and now that it is a bit more mature, like there's kind of a clear entry point for a mid-level designer or a senior designer or a junior designer or an associate designer, whatever titles people are going after. When I was back looking for jobs in the start, I don't remember really seeing, it wasn't even in my mind, this idea of junior designer versus mid-level or whatever. Maybe I was just naive and unaware of the industry. But also I didn't feel junior because I had already had work experience in other fields. So when I was moving into it, I didn't feel like, I didn't feel junior. And like, at the age I was, it would have hurt my ego to be thought of as a junior. Like I was like, no, I have experience. I have things to offer here.
Yeah.
And I feel like the word junior feels like, you're a kid, you don't have anything, like you're here and you're kind of you're a blank slate with no experience. Maybe you've done an internship, you have school, there's a certain kind of, worldview of design because of the bubble you've lived in. And now you're in a real work experience. And now you're going to figure out, oh, this is really how this work is done. Not in the vacuum of like a classroom with a teacher and classmates and no real world kind of limitations or bounds. So
yeah, it is a funny one. There's a certain expectation at that level, on both sides, I think. So when you're hiring for an entry level position, you're kind of expecting people with less experience, obviously people with less experience. So, but even when you have less experience, I think if you were like what you were saying there, you were in a different industry, you transferred over here, and there was lots of transferable life skills and professional skills that you had. Anytime I'm talking to someone about changing career, or if they're new to the industry, if they're just getting out of college, but maybe all the jobs they've had up to this point are in retail or something like that, right? Which doesn't sound like an obvious transferable skill into design. And I'm always like, well, you've probably learned loads of skills in retail or whatever industry you're doing that are transferable. They're just not obvious, right? So how can you make those connections? How can you communicate that to the person that is going to be interviewing you? So, because I was in that position actually, I came back as a mature. I went to college at 23. I worked in retail before. I became like a supervisor and stuff like that in that place before going to college. So I used that as experience, and in all of the interviews that I had when I was going as a designer after going to college, I always referenced this. I leaned on the previous experience, and what I was doing was saying, okay, I don't have the design things you're looking for, like exactly the experience in design exactly, but what I have is all this other stuff. Like I've dealt with difficult customers. I've understand the customer experience working in retail, which is transferable enough to user experience, and like understanding different people's needs, having tense situations that you might have to work around sometimes, all this type of stuff. So I would always say to people, like, frame that in a way that is comparable or is transferable into the new role that you're trying to move into, So it might not be obvious, but it can tick a box in someone's head. Oh, they can deal with pressure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Footnote here. If that topic interests you, you can go back to episode 13 where kind of Tom and I talk about before we were designers and our movement into the industry. So episode 13, before we were designers.
Nice.
Footnote closed. But yeah, that's a big thing. I think I have this kind of thing sometimes I talk or chat with others about, is this idea of like identifying a thread through your career. Like, if you're trying to break in, like whatever you've done before this, there is a thread there that connects your experiences. So for me, like I had to connect. Okay, I had done some art in high school. I had studied music in India. So that kind of experience, there was big interest in anthropology, got interested in religion, but sort of kind of religion in the sense of like why people believe what they believe. So there was sort of this thread of like really deep interest in people and like, what makes people behave the way they do or think the way they do and stuff like that. So that's sort of kind of anthropological thread that led me to these different things, was sort of a thread that I used to like kind of make sense of that transition. So I think finding that thread. So if you have a retail, like you've worked in retail, like there's obviously a thread there of kind of understanding customers and understanding people and being able to respond to their needs and all those kind of things. Yeah. It's super useful and transferable.
Totally. I found it. I remember when I started in that job first, I don't know if I mentioned it in the podcast that we did, but I remember they train you in and all. It was a kind of a very large store especially for Ireland's perspective. But they were kind of saying, if you're working on the checkouts, remember that you're the last memory they have before they leave. And that stuck with me forever. It's like, no matter how good the experience is when they go around the shop and do all that stuff, if they have a bad experience with you, they'll leave with a bad experience. And that's something that's transferable anywhere, and you think about how you communicate with customers and consumers and stuff. So I totally agree with you on your points there as well.
Yeah.
So is there a bit of a kind of an elephant in the room or a dilemma when it comes to people trying to get into entry level positions with regards to experience? This is something that kind of people that I've spoke to that are in that entry level kind of area, they kind of say all the entry level jobs are looking for X amount of experience, but I can't get experience without going, doing these things.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a pickle, right? Catch-22 or whatever you want to call it, right? How do you get the experience? How can you have the experience without having the job, but doing something that gives you experience? Like, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, like the easy answer the easy thought that was probably how I did it was look for any chance you can to grab experience and even create experience for yourself. It doesn't like you can own your career in a way that not relying on someone to hire you in order to get experience. Like you can do that on your own. It takes obviously some creativity and some some rigor and some like a lot of your personal time to figure out how to do that. But it is possible, and if you believe you have value to give, then you can create projects for yourself. Like, obviously, like a student project in a portfolio is often very clearly a student project. Like it's got all this sort of signs of a student project, which is great, but it's always going to be probably looked at as a student project. On the other hand, like a project that you've created for yourself and you've put out, maybe you actually put something out in the world, or at least you kind of did all the design aspects of a thing that could be put out in the world. That's also interesting. And then kind of the next level is, did you actually kind of get a project and someone hired you, quote unquote, like whether they paid you or not is not really relevant. Ideally, you get paid for your work. But some cases, maybe you do take on projects, short projects, just to be able to show things, get more items in get more kind of case studies in your portfolio,
and experience.
And then you're creating experience for yourself. Those are, experience nodes in the journey, in the flow of life here. And those things all count, and they show a lot, right? When you're going for interview, they show that okay, sure, nobody has hired you yet, but you've taken it on yourself to find that experience and to practice your craft and all of those things. And here's what you have to show for it. And, I would think it puts you in a different category. In my opinion, it does, in terms of the person who's fresh out of school, who just has student projects, versus you who've kind of gone kind of a step up to kind of take ownership of your career.
Yeah, totally agree.
What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we're kind of uniquely positioned in design and development in those worlds, I think, of being able to make work for ourselves. Pros and cons to this, right? So I think I would always encourage people to do that. Like, if do personal projects or get involved with projects, maybe it's even charity work or something like that. But like, what I like to see is someone who's hungry and eager to learn. And as you said, I agree with the thing about often the times student projects from college or whatever, they often do look like student projects. So that's not to say there's not valuable insights in them, but I think you need to beef up your portfolio and your experience. If you're waiting to make it into a role, like, don't sit around. I don't think this is like other industries. So, if you're thinking about, someone who studied law, for example, right, you can't just go, I don't know if you can just go and make a case study up. You can't just make up this, court case, or maybe you can. I don't know how that works, right? But we can with design. You can. There's loads of opportunities to basically identify and get involved in stuff. You're making me think about, there's a designer / developer that I follow on Twitter, and her handle is Alyssa X. I think at Alyssa XUU, and she basically is like one of the most proactive people I've ever seen. Like, I think she's relatively young at this stage. I think she's probably maybe she's not even 20 yet. She's just done loads of personal projects, and I think she's working at the moment now, but I don't think she went to college. She was just like self-taught with code and design and all that, and she basically just like puts out these personal projects that like just are jaw-dropping. Like, I can't believe she does this stuff, like, right? So that she's she's probably the most exceptional example I can think of someone who just like takes the initiative, can design up these things and then develop them, and like just puts them out there. It's like, oh, here you go. Here's an open source version of this insanely impressive thing that I've made, right? So I think she's kind of an outlier because she's exceptional. But what I see when I see work like hers is that, like, if you go to her Twitter thing, you'll see lots of traction. There's like thousands of people recognizing this, and her work is amazing. But what she's showing is that she's interested. She sees opportunities in these gaps in the industry or whatever, and then she can make stuff happen as well, right? So, as I said, she can design it and build it and all the type of stuff. So I couldn't do what she does, like. Yeah. But if you can spot these opportunities and do something around it, so if it's research, if it's design, if you can come up with something, maybe it's conceptual, maybe it's not actually working, but nobody expects you to do everything. But I think there's loads of opportunities, and showing that initiative is a big thing, because when I as I mentioned there, when I'm interviewing someone, and not even just junior, just in general, like, for me, a superpower in people, especially designers, is like interest, enthusiasm, willingness to learn and grow. Like that if someone can authentically communicate that to me when I'm talking to them, that gets me excited, because maybe they don't have everything just yet, but you can see the opportunity for growth and that their willingness to grow. And thinking back to when I was getting into the industry, I think I communicated that quite well because it was authentic. Now I didn't I wasn't perfect. I was rough around the edges if you're entry levels graduate or whatever. But I do remember I was genuinely enthusiastic and genuinely I was kind of excited about the opportunities and I would and all the possibilities of this career, and I tried to communicate that as authentically with people, and I could see that it resonated with them. So if that's if you've got that in you, I think getting that across authentically is a big thing.
Yeah.
People pick up on that.
The authenticity there is, I think, a key piece of it, because if you just kind of think of like 3 archetypes of a new designer going for an interview, there could be kind of your highly skilled but like somber kind of person who kind of comes in, has an amazing portfolio but has no interest or enthusiasm, as you mentioned. That could be one archetype. The middle is sort of the person who has a okay portfolio and has a moderate level of interest in kind of what you do, is sort of, or even kind of maybe say like an inauthentic enthusiasm, which is usually kind of pretty transparent, of like you're faking it to try to like make it seem like you're excited, but you really maybe come across as not knowing even why you should be excited about this thing. And then sort of this person who's maybe their portfolio is weak, maybe they don't have that many projects, but they come in like really excited about this thing. Maybe they've spent some time reading about it and have like bring something to the table here. Not necessarily, a strong perspective on what they can exactly do, but that they really are interested in it and they want to contribute to it, and they're excited and they want to learn, and they're showing that they're interested in learning. So like thinking about those 3 types, like I think, in my opinion, the last one feels the most attractive. Like it's not just about the skills you bring or how flashy or cool your portfolio looks. Like portfolios get you in the door, but once you're in the door, like it's you have to show who you are as a person, and what you could actually contribute. And any good team should view a candidate not just who they are now, but who they'll be in the next 6 months or a year or even further on.
Yeah. Potential.
So if you can show that potential. Yeah, potential.
Potential is a word that gets thrown around a lot, and it's, depending on how you think about it, it's kind of a fluffy word, but definitely I think that's very important. Like how people pick up on those things and can see, I can see this person's like, they're rough around the edge now, which is expected, but I can see something in them that it's ambition, tenacity, interest, all these different things. Depending, it also depends on the type of work that you're doing. If you're focusing on research, for example, you probably don't have all the benefit that visual designers do of having a very visual, immediate response from the viewer to their portfolio. Because if you've got decent visual design skills, immediately people can pick it up. If someone sends me a visual design portfolio, within a split second, I can tell. Like it's almost immediate. Like if you're experienced, you're tuned into what you're looking for, and you can make a snap judgment, which is both a pro and a con, right? And I think that's one of the issues with maybe if you're talking about the archetypes, the third version that you said, that someone has a lot of promise but maybe not a great portfolio, or so they're not putting their best foot forward somehow, right? So how do they do that? I think it's important to think about that, because the last thing you want is to have the most amount of potential, but you can't get in the door. People, whatever you're presenting, whatever you're handing over, doesn't get you in the door. So what I often say to people, if they ask, like if they're looking to get into the industry, is think about presentation. No one's expecting you, if you're not a visual designer or you don't have a kind of classical graphic design background or whatever, you can still present things very cleanly, and you can tell a story in a different way. So you got to be clever about it. It's no one size fits all, but lean on your skills. And I think, just learning clean, clear layout and presentation is important, because it can be enough just to get you in the door. Maybe you don't have all the experience, but you've told a story in a way that piques someone's interest. And then when they meet you, they're like, that's it. This is the person. Yeah. Because it's very hard to get that kind of reaction over a document that you send through the internet.
Yeah, and I think also kind of the personality behind it is really important. I think there's a general thing of that. It feels like a lot of people trying to get into the industry, but even designers working in the industry, is not enough investment in your own network and the people you know and the people you're in touch with within this industry. Like it's obviously super important for any new designer. Before I was in Ireland, I was based in Washington, D.C., which is a very kind of political environment. It's a very kind of suit and tie city, or at least the one I remember, suit and tie, even when it's 1,000,000 degrees out in the summer, the swampy, humid, disgusting climate, like, wearing a black suit, walking down the street, like, so that environment was very like, it's all about kind of, who you know and expanding your network and going to these events and schmoozing and doing all these things, which, has like a side that is kind of cringeworthy. But being in that environment, there is like, I did kind of experience like the value of that. And like my entry into design was exactly that. It was, to sum it up really quickly, it was like going to an event, meeting a person, asking that person to grab a coffee, talking to her. She introduced me to the person, her boss. I had an interview with the boss, even though my portfolio was absolutely like terrible. It was some really terrible keynote deck. Like I wouldn't even want to look at it now because it was so bad, but it still got me an interview just because I had this introduction and the person thought maybe I had that kind of excitement about the thing, with zero actual experience. And then that led to the next thing, and that led a piece of learning. And then eventually I was actually getting interviews on my own with a next version of my portfolio that was slightly better, but still pretty bad. And it just kept going until eventually it kind of all came together. So, and you never know kind of that first spark, what that will lead to. The next thing will lead to the next thing. And then, so.
You kind of flipped it in a way. So instead of like you started with the person, with yourself, and then followed it up with the portfolio, which is an advantage.
Yeah. I mean, that was,
in a way.
Yeah, no, I think, because once you have a personal introduction, like if someone, if I would, let's say my job, we were hiring, we put out a job application. First thing I get is Tom reaches out to me and says, "Oh, I know this designer. They're in town. Sure, they've just graduated, but they're really good. I've worked with it, or I know them, or whatever. I've seen their work." And that personal recommendation almost, gets them in the door even without looking at their portfolio, because, well, this person said they're worth talking to, and then they come in and we talk, and, maybe it wouldn't go to the final stage, but it's an opportunity for that person to also get in the door and also practice their interview skills. And who knows, maybe it would turn into a job. But that personal recommendation is huge. Like it can overstep a lot of that, application reviewing stuff that people can get just, tossed out just because they sort of don't meet the sort of the opinion of the reviewer.
Yeah. I totally agree with that, and that's ongoing actually in the industry. That doesn't. I mean, when I say that, I mean that goes on throughout the career. If I often get people texting me that I've worked with in the past saying we're looking for senior UX designer or mid-level UX designer or whatever. Never, it's not as much junior level ones, but do you know anyone? If you're listening to that might sound a bit disheartening because you're just like, oh, how do I get in that world? And they're not not trying to like, whatever, circumvent the process or whatever, but they like, as you're saying, they would value my opinion. If I've worked with someone in the past and I refer them, then they take that would hold weight, much like you would, much like any designer that I talk to. If I ask for their opinion on someone, or do they know someone, if they give me, if I trust their opinion, and I'm sure I do, and they mention someone, well then they've got that extra level of interest from me.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one of the mistakes I see people make is reaching out to people only about a job. Like, let's say Acme Corp is hiring a junior designer. Let's say you meet all the qualifications. You reach out to their design manager to talk to them about this opening. Like maybe that'll lead to a conversation. But wouldn't it be nicer if you already had your eyes on Acme Corp, you had already connected with this person in a completely different setting of you maybe learning about their team, and you get to share a little about yourself maybe, and they know you, then you are kind of in their mind, and then that job opens up, and then you reach out again, and then you already kind of bubble up to the top of the stack. So there's ways to, it's not gaming the system, it's just that's how people work. Like relationships are important, and building those relationships proactively, not just when there's an opening, is huge. Like I can call to mind, the last kind of all the people who reached out to me just to chat, just to check in about stuff, like people who are starting out, like I know them by name and they're front of mind. So if someone ever asked me,
Yeah, same.
We're looking to hire somebody new, like I would immediately have a few people to throw their way. Like that's just how things work.
It's human nature, yeah. There's no kind of like that's just how people work, I guess.
Right.
So I think we're kind of hitting close to time now for this episode, but there's a lot of meaty stuff in here. So what do you say we take this back up again in the next episode and kind of continue on?
That sounds great, Tom.
Good stuff. Okay. Well, thanks very much for listening. As we usually say, if you can share with your friends and colleagues, anyone you think would be interested in what we kind of talk about, and let us know if there's anything in particular that you want us to discuss. Where can people find you online, Craig?
Can reach out on LinkedIn, Craig Phillips, Twitter, CP5446, I think. How about you, Tom?
I'm at Tom C Design on Twitter and Tom Cunningham on LinkedIn as well. So yeah, always happy to converse with people who reach out. Great stuff. Okay, till next time we'll talk more about this topic.
Sounds good. All right, have a good one, Tom.
You too.